My name is Michael Byrd. I'm a founder and CEO of the law firm ByrdAdatto with offices in Dallas and Chicago and representing doctors and dentists and other providers all over the country. You are listening to Interview with a Surgeon with the Surgeon Agent.
On this episode of Interview with the Surgeon, we welcome Michael Byrd, a partner at ByrdAdatto, a healthcare and business law firm based in Dallas with offices in Chicago. As the son of a doctor and entrepreneur, Michael has a personal connection to both business and medicine. Michael has blended these life experiences to become a leading advocate for doctors throughout the United States. He routinely lectures at continuing medical education seminars on the various business and legal issues that medical professionals face. Outside of healthcare, Michael has used these same skills to handle sensitive and complicated business matters for entrepreneurs, business owners, attorneys, CPAs, high net worth individuals, and public figures. With his background as both a litigator and transactional attorney, Michael brings a comprehensive perspective to business and healthcare issues. He has been named to Texas Rising Stars and Texas Super Lawyers for multiple years and recognized as a best lawyer in Dallas by D Magazine.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining Interview with the Surgeon. Today, we welcome special guest Michael Byrd of ByrdAdatto, healthcare law firm in Dallas. Michael, how are we doing today?
Awesome. I appreciate you having me.
It's a real pleasure. So let's just jump right into it. How did ByrdAdatto get started, and where do you see it going in the future?
Well, I think the best way to start the answer is how Byrd and Adatto, myself and my partner ByrdAdatto, got started. So I've been practicing since 1995, and my dad's a surgeon. And at the same time, Brad was starting his practice in New Orleans, and his dad's a surgeon. And I think those influences started pointing us towards healthcare, but really pointing us towards representing physicians. And so, one of the foundational things that started pretty early in my career was the idea of speaking to young surgeons who are coming out of practice with their first contract. And what we developed over the years, even before ByrdAdatto formed, was a practice niche focused on representing doctors and dentists and other providers and being able to handle anything from the first contract to their sale of their practice at the end. And like I said, everything in between. And so we built, through our team and our experiences over the, 25 years, a pretty, sizable book of experiences to be able to help our clients. We started ByrdAdatto in 2015. It was our entire team from a prior firm decided that we needed to be on our own platform because of our growth nationally. And so what I'm most excited about where we're going, and I know, Matthew, you and I've talked about this before, is we started a membership model with how we charge our clients a few years ago. In 2017, we did it in a beta mode. It's called Access Plus. We only offered it to our existing doctors and other providers. And it was, we had some trial and error trying to figure out how to make it work, but the concept was really popular. And so we finally figured out how to launch it in 2018. And now 75% of our client base is on a subscription model with us. And we just see so many benefits with how our relationship with our clients has evolved. We don't have conversations about surprise bills. We just talk about whatever it is that they're needing to talk about and give them help. And so for our future, we really see that being, kind of the model of how we work with our doctors in the future.
What obstacles are you seeing with physician employment in light of the current pandemic?
That's a great question. And so we know that we talk about kind of recruiting season and contract season, and usually that's winding up by the end of March. If not April, we'll have some trailers of people still getting their contracts finalized to start at some point, July 1, August 1 timeframe. And of course, COVID hit, this year square, right at the tail end of the season. I mean, in some areas it was in February. And so more than ever, I had contracts going into the end of June for people to start, and almost all of it was delays by the practices who were closed for a period of time, not sure what they were going to do, and or even delays on the hospital contracts where they were just, their attention was focused elsewhere. But what we also noticed was a more and more a quote COVID clause being put into these contracts that dealt with the uncertainty of what was going to happen with COVID for people that were going to be starting in just a few short months, and giving the practice or the hospital an out if they were closed again or were otherwise impacted by COVID. So it added a wrinkle to to the process of trying to help guide our clients on what their risk is when they're considering an opportunity.
What do you see for the upcoming recruiting year of 2021?
I'll start with the fact that I foresee potential trouble on the horizon with the fact that interviews are happening virtually. And so, it's kind of common sense that when you're not forming a human connection, seeing things together, but you're doing it virtually, you aren't getting the full sense of the opportunity. And so there's more risk. And so, just kind of sitting on that for a minute, this idea of risk, when we talk to our clients who are looking at a contract, we look at it from a spectrum of risk. Everyone has a choice. And some people, as Brad likes to say, some people get nervous, stepping out of the shower, and some people will jump out of a perfectly good airplane. And so the way we meet people, where they are as far as their risk comfort is just to talk about it in those terms. And so, if you sign a contract with a non-compete, and you're wanting to stay in that area, you're assuming a certain degree of risk. And so what we do is we talk about that. Going back to your question about, how COVID will impact things. Well, if you sign a contract and you've never stepped foot in the facility that you're going to work or shook hands, literally, or whatever the new version of shaking hands is, then you're taking on more risk. And so how do we minimize that? I mean, I don't know that we're, at least in the short run, going to get around the fact that these have to be done virtually. And so, I think your role as a surgeon agent is really important, more so even than it was last quote season, because you have to be able to talk through and identify the quote due diligence that you would need to be working through to make sure an opportunity is a good opportunity, and asking the questions that need to be asked. And then when it comes to the contract, really, really digging in and exploring to make sure that you understand what you're getting into. And I say the flip side for a hospital or for a practice is they have the same risk, and they're bringing someone into their world, without ever having met them and operated with them. And so you really want to make sure that that you're doing your due diligence from the practice side as well.
What are your thoughts on hospital employment versus private practice and how COVID might be impacting this?
Another good question. So, what we know is that, by a pretty wide margin, hospital contracts are the majority of contracts that are out there for what, people coming out of the school. I don't remember the last statistic I saw was, 70% of doctors are going to join a hospital system. But, kind of framing it, there's pros and cons to both, right? I mean, a hospital contract can be a really good fit for someone who wants to focus on the clinical side. They want to focus on the practice of medicine, and they're not so interested in the business of medicine, and maybe even have an aversion to it. And so, there can be a really good fit there. those contracts tend to have higher base compensation with lower upside. And, it's kind of more of a stable risk, less risky contract setup. The flip side is that private practice can be a good fit for those who are interested in the business of medicine. Those contracts tend to have a lower base salary with more upside, and you really are, there's going to be more opportunities on the business of medicine, both in becoming involved with and taking advantage of opportunities to run and be a partner in a particular practice. But there's also typically more ancillary opportunities that come up in a private practice setting. I know you're going to talk to Brad in a future episode about those, but there tends to be more opportunity, on the private practice side. And so with this recruiting season, I think you have to acknowledge that there may be less job opportunities out there because of COVID. But I think that you also have to recognize that, there are more jobs than there are surgeons coming into practice. And so there's been a shortage already or a surplus, a shortage of physicians for jobs. And so I do believe that that's going to balance itself out. And I believe that everyone's still going to have opportunities. I don't think that there will be as big of a menu of choices for surgeons. Maybe the ones that are at the top of their program will still have a wider selection. And so where I can see some risk that could cause trouble down the line is someone that really fits the profile of a private practice and their only opportunities in a hospital setting. That's kind of a recipe for not a long-term relationship. And that may be fine if they know that going into it. But you certainly would look at different things in your contract, such as non-competes, if you know that this is a stepping stone as opposed to the long-term solution.
What are some of the biggest mistakes young surgeons make with their employment agreement?
So one of the ways we talk about this, one is that they've become kind of hyper-focused on the contract, and they really try to aggressively negotiate it. And what I'll say from my experience is that when I see that, that's a red flag, because it means to me that the job kind of as naturally presented isn't a precise match for what the doctor's looking for. And so what I have found is that in these contracts where there's intense negotiations, we can sometimes get to a contract that works. In fact, we oftentimes can. But I'm noting more and more that those are the doctors that call me back within 2 years telling me that it's not working and that they're looking for their next thing. And so there is, a degree of not trying to rationalize your way into a particular opportunity. And so it's hard because you like the idea of an opportunity, but it's not a fit. And so you start justifying, and we go through this all the time. And I've had contracts, I can think of 3 to 4 off the top of my hand that were a week into it and they walked away because they sat there and were like, just they talked themselves into it. And in those examples, I tried to talk them out of it, and they're like, no, it's gonna be okay. It's really good, and this we'll get through it. And it turned out that those red flags were more than red flags; they were problems.
What is the biggest misconception of physicians as they approach an employment opportunity?
So the misconception is that the contract itself is the thing that is going to define success. And so you have some who will focus on the contract. We kind of talked about that the last. And some who will just focus on the relationship. Like, I love this doctor, they're my mentor, You know, I grew up wanting to be a part of this, and, you know, just the relationship is enough that they want to do it. They want to be a part of it. And if you just focus on one, it's really a one-dimensional view of the entire opportunity. And really, even if you do both, that's a two-dimensional. And I would suggest that they want to have a three-dimensional perspective. And that's adding that third dimension of identifying what they're trying to accomplish with their career. And I know you do a lot of help with that, Matthew, as a surgeon agent, but it's so important as a first step to know your own career goals. We call it the plan A, plan B, and know, you know, where do you want to be? If this thing works, like, what does this look like in 5 years? And if it doesn't work, what's your plan B? What's your contingency plan? And if you can take that, marry it to the relationship. And so, you know, if you don't really know them, and in this COVID time, that's going to be harder to accomplish, to get to know them, to see that there's a fit from a relational standpoint, all the outside the contract type things, and then marry that to the contract itself and make sure the contract fits, you know, kind of all those components. Then you have a three-dimensional kind of view of it. And you know, people don't naturally go into it to do that because they don't know. I mean, they don't learn that in school, and really even you know, hospitals and private practices don't focus on that ever. You know, I tend to see they get locked in on this idea of the contract because that's what makes it enforceable. And, you know, you know, here I am, the lawyer, saying, yes, that's important, but there's other things that's going to make this successful.
What advice do you have for young surgeons when they're considering using maybe a family friend or someone in their network that's not a healthcare specific attorney compared to a healthcare specific attorney for their physician employment agreement?
It's a great question again. And, you know, going back to my last answer, you're going to get the one-dimensional advice. What you're going to get is what any lawyer can do is they can read the words on a contract and tell you what it says. Can they give you any context? Can they give you any advice on what's not in the contract but should be, what's happening in the market, and then how to explore these other two dimensions that we just talked about? And the answer is no, because they don't have those experiences in healthcare, and in particular in representing physicians or surgeons, to know, you know, these are the areas that you have to explore.
Although it's never been done before, what are your thoughts on surgeons having an agent?
Well, yeah, I mean, I've just learned about this with you, and I think it's brilliant. I've told you this. I've said it on stuff on speeches we've given before, because, you know, where we've as closely as possible filled this role before, but I feel like where we filled it was too late, even though it was when they got their first contract. The young surgeons are not getting the education and training for the most part. It's getting a little better on the business side of medicine in their training. And so they have no idea. They're going into the wild, wild west when they are looking at their first job opportunity. And what a role that the surgeon agent idea fills is picking up right there at the beginning, where you're trying to think about the plan A, plan B that we talked about, how to look for a job, how to interview for a job, all of these things that are not part of their focus while they're trying to learn how to become a surgeon and specialize in their craft. And so I think it's a really important niche that's filled, to have someone to kind of be their guide or their agent, you know, from this, you know, back end of their training through their first job.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of Interview with the Surgeon. Until next time, stay focused and keep following your dreams.